What happens when a town decides you're worthless? When they won't even look at you long enough to see you're human? In 1879 Texas, a young woman covered in dirt became invisible to everyone, except one man who refused to turn away. This is a story about survival, dignity, and what it takes to stand when the whole world wants you on your knees. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind that cut through Red Willow Town in the winter of 1879 didn't discriminate. It carved through wool coats and canvas tents with the same indifference it showed the girl huddled against the side of Morrison's general store. But while the wind treated everyone equally, the people of Red Willow did not. Maylin had learned that lesson the hard way. She sat with her knees pulled tight to her chest, her back pressed against the rough wooden planks that still held the morning's frost. Her hair, or what could be seen of it beneath the layers of dust and grime, hung in matted tangles around her face. Her clothes, if they could be called that, were little more than rags held together by stubborn threads and sheer will. The fabric had once been blue, maybe. Now it was the color of the road, of hard luck, of things people stepped over without a second thought. Around her, Red Willow moved with the casual rhythm of a town that knew exactly what it was and didn't pretend to be anything else. Men in clean shirts and leather vests walked past, their boots striking the boardwalk in confident, measured steps. Women in modest dresses kept their eyes forward, their hands clutching baskets of goods from the general store. Children ran and shouted, their laughter bright and careless in the cold air. And every single one of them looked right through her. It wasn't that they didn't see her. She could feel their eyes, quick, darting glances that landed and bounced away like stones skipping across water. She could hear the shift in their conversations as they drew near, the slight lowering of voices, the subtle widening of the space between them and her. She was something to be avoided, like a mud puddle or a pile of horse manure. An obstacle. A problem that would hopefully move on to become someone else's concern. Maylin had stopped expecting anything different. She'd been in Red Willow for 6 days. Or was it 7? Time had a way of blurring when your world shrunk to the size of a single block of buildings, when your only goal was to make it through one more night. She'd arrived on foot, trailing a merchant's wagon from 2 towns back, hoping they might need an extra hand, someone to wash dishes or mend clothes. They hadn't. Nobody did. "You speak English?" the merchant had asked when she'd finally worked up the courage to approach. "Yes," she'd said. Her voice had come out smaller than she'd intended. The merchant had looked her up and down, not with interest, but with the flat assessment of someone evaluating livestock. "You got family here?" "No." "Anyone expecting you?" "No." He'd spat into the dirt. "Then you best keep moving. We got no work for strays." Stray. That's what she was now. The word had teeth. She'd tried the saloon first, slipping in through the back door while the afternoon crowd was still thin. The owner, a thick-necked man with a face like sun-baked leather, had taken one look at her and shaken his head. "Get out." "I can work," she'd said quickly. "I can clean, I can cook. You can leave." His hand had moved to something beneath the bar. "Right now." She'd left. She'd tried the boarding house next, then the restaurant, then the laundry service run by a stern-faced woman with gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her whole face. Each time the answer had been the same. Sometimes it was words. Sometimes it was just a door closing, but the message never changed. Not here, not you, not ever. By the 3rd day, she'd stopped trying. By the 5th day, she'd stopped moving. Now she just sat. Mornings were the hardest. That's when the cold seemed to settle deepest into her bones, when the hunger was a living thing clawing at her insides. She'd learned to tuck her hands inside her sleeves, to keep her breathing shallow so the ache in her ribs didn't feel quite so sharp. She'd learned which shopkeepers might leave out scraps and which ones would chase her off with a broom. She'd learned that the best time to scavenge was just after sunset, when the light was too dim for people to get a good look at her, when they could pretend she was just a shadow passing by. She'd learned how to survive in the spaces between people's attention, but surviving wasn't the same as living. She knew that. Even at 19, even with everything she'd already been through, she knew the difference. A group of men walked past, their voices loud and loose with midday whiskey. One of them glanced her way, caught her eye for a fraction of a second, then turned back to his companions. "And I told him, I said, 'You want to play poker? You bring real money, not—'" Their laughter drowned out the rest. Maylin pulled her knees tighter. She could feel the cold working its way through her skin. settling into the meat of her, the marrow. She wondered, in a distant sort of way, how long a person could sit in one spot before they just became part of the landscape, before they turned into a piece of the scenery nobody noticed anymore. Maybe that's what she was already. A fixture, a thing. The thought should have bothered her more than it did. The sun was high and brittle in the winter sky when she heard the horse. Not unusual. Horses came and went all day in Red Willow, but this one moved differently, slower, more deliberate. The rhythm of its hooves against the hard-packed dirt was steady, unhurried. Maylin didn't look up. She'd learned not to look up. Eye contact invited attention, and attention was rarely good. The horse stopped. She kept her gaze on the ground, on the pattern of boot prints and wheel ruts that crisscrossed the street like scars. She counted them. 17 boot prints in her field of vision. 18. 19. Boots appeared in her line of sight, worn leather, scuffed and dusty. Not fancy, but not falling apart either. Working boots. The kind that got resold instead of replaced. She waited for them to move past. They didn't. "Ma'am?" The voice was low, quiet. Not soft exactly, but careful. Like someone trying not to spook a stray dog. Maylin's muscles tensed. She pressed herself flatter against the wall. Sometimes if you made yourself small enough, invisible enough, people would give up and move on. Sometimes. "Ma'am, you all right?" She risked a glance up, just enough to see him without fully raising her head. He was tall, or maybe everyone just seemed tall from where she sat, broad-shouldered beneath a dark coat that had seen better days but was still in one piece. His hat was pulled low, shadowing most of his face, but she could see the lower half, strong jaw, a few days' worth of stubble, a mouth that wasn't smiling but wasn't cruel either. And a scar. A long one, running from just below his left eye down to his jawline, the kind that made people look away. She knew about scars, about the things that made people look away. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice came out like sandpaper. He didn't move, didn't step closer, but didn't leave either, just stood there holding his horse's reins in one hand. "You need help?" The question was so unexpected she almost laughed. Help? When was the last time anyone had asked her that? When was the last time anyone had asked her anything that wasn't a version of, "Why are you still here?" "No," she said. "You sure?" She looked up then, fully up, meeting his eyes. They were gray, the color of winter clouds before snow. And they were looking at her, not through her, not past her, at her. It made something twist in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope, and hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I don't need your help," she said, harder this time. "I don't need anything." He studied her for a long moment. She expected him to argue, or worse, to agree and walk away. Instead, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. Then he did something she didn't expect. He sat down. Not next to her. That would have been too much, too close, but on the edge of the boardwalk, maybe 5 feet away. Close enough to talk without shouting, far enough to give her space. He took off his hat and set it on his knee. His hair was dark, touched with gray at the temples, despite him looking no older than 35. The scar was more visible now, a pale line cutting through sun-weathered skin. "Name's Cole Turner," he said, not looking at her but at the street ahead. "Just rode in this morning. Hell of a wind out there." Maylin didn't respond. She didn't know what he wanted. Men who sat down next to girls like her usually wanted something, and it was never good. But he didn't move closer, didn't ask her name, just sat there, quiet, like he had all the time in the world, and nowhere more important to be. A minute passed, then another. "You hungry?" he asked finally. "No." "Thirsty?" "No." "You're a terrible liar." Her head snapped toward him. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his expression, not amusement exactly, but something gentler than she was used to seeing on anyone's face. "I'm not lying," she said. "All right." He reached into his coat and pulled out a canteen, old dented metal with a leather strap worn smooth from use. He unscrewed the cap and took a drink, then set it down on the boardwalk between them, not offering it directly, just leaving it there. "In case you change your mind," he said. Maylin stared at the canteen. Her throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. She'd found water 2 days ago, a horse trough behind the livery stable. It had tasted like rust and horse spit, but it had been water. She hadn't found any since. Pride said to ignore it. Survival said something else. I'm filthy, she said quietly. I'll contaminate it. Cole glanced at her, then at the canteen. It's seen worse. I don't mean the canteen. She meant herself. She meant the dirt that covered her skin like a second layer, the smell she knew must be coming off her in waves, even though she'd stopped noticing it days ago. She meant everything that made her unfit for decent company. She meant, don't waste your kindness on something this ruined. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, water's water, dirt washes off. Simple words. Practical. But the way he said them, like they were just facts, not judgments, made her throat tighten in a way that had nothing to do with thirst. She reached for the canteen. Her hands were shaking. She tried to hide it, but there was no point. He could see everything anyway. The water was cold and clean, and the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. She forced herself to take small sips, to not gulp it down like an animal, even though every cell in her body screamed at her to drain the whole thing. When she lowered the canteen, she'd only drunk maybe a quarter of it. She held it out to him. Keep it, he said. I can't. You can. He stood up, brushing dust from his pants. I'll be at the boarding house if you need anything else. He picked up his hat, settled it back on his head, and started to walk away. Wait, Mei Lin heard herself say. He stopped, turned back. She didn't know what she wanted to say. Thank you seemed too small. Why are you doing this seemed too dangerous to ask. Don't touch me, she said instead. I'm filthy. I'll make you dirty too. Something flickered across his face, not pity, not disgust. Something else. Something she couldn't name. Noted, he said. Then he was gone, leading his horse down the street toward the far end of town where the boarding house stood. Mei Lin sat there for a long time after he left, the canteen clutched in both hands like an anchor. The metal was warming from her grip, losing its chill. Around her, Red Willow continued its day. People walked past. Wagons rolled by. Nobody looked at her, nobody except him. She lifted the canteen and took another small sip. The water slid down her throat, cold and clean. So clean, it almost hurt. Dirt washes off, he'd said. She looked down at her hands, at the grime embedded in every crease of her palms, under her fingernails, in the whorls of her fingerprints. She'd been dirty for so long she'd almost forgotten what clean felt like. But she remembered now. Suddenly, vividly, she remembered. What you... But 3 years ago, she had had clean hands. 3 years ago, she'd had a family. They'd left China together, her mother, her father, her younger brother Wei. The promises had been bright and big. Opportunities in America, work in the railroad camps, money to send back home. A better life. The journey had been... She didn't have words for what the journey had been. Weeks pressed into the dark, cramped belly of a ship, surrounded by people who coughed and wept and prayed in a dozen different languages. The smell had been unbearable. The sounds worse. When they'd finally seen land, Mei Lin had wept with relief. That relief had lasted exactly 4 days. The railroad camp was brutal. Men died regularly, crushed by falling rocks, lost to dynamite accidents, worked until their hearts simply stopped. But the camp bosses didn't care. There were always more workers, always more desperate people willing to trade their lives for a handful of coins. Her father had lasted 6 months. A tunnel collapse. They'd never recovered his body. Her mother had lasted another year. Fever. There was no doctor, no medicine, just Mei Lin pressing wet cloths to her mother's burning forehead and watching her waste away to nothing. Wei had been 12 when he'd decided to run. Some of the older boys were planning to escape, to try their luck in one of the mining towns further west. They'd promised to take Wei with them, promised to keep him safe. Mei Lin had begged him not to go. He'd hugged her tight and told her he'd come back for her. As soon as he made enough money, as soon as he found somewhere safe, he'd come back. She'd never seen him again. After that, Mei Lin had been alone, and alone was dangerous. The camp bosses had started looking at her differently. The other workers had started looking at her differently. She'd understood what would happen if she stayed, so she'd run. She'd hidden in supply wagons, slept in barns, traded work for food when she could, and stole when she couldn't. She'd learned that being pretty was a liability, that men looked at young Chinese women and saw either a servant or something worse. She'd learned that dirt was a kind of armor, that if you made yourself ugly enough, invisible enough, some men would leave you alone. Not all of them, but some. She'd been running for 2 years. 2 years of towns that didn't want her, jobs that lasted a week before someone complained, nights spent shivering in alleys and abandoned buildings. 2 years of being a ghost, a stray, something that existed in the margins of other people's lives. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, until today. Until a scarred cowboy with gray eyes had sat down next to her and asked if she was all right. But the sun was lower now, painting Red Willow in shades of amber and rust. Mei Lin had moved from her spot by the general store to a narrow space between two buildings where she could watch the street without being seen. Old habit. Always know where the exits are. Always have a way out. She'd been watching the boarding house for the past hour. Not consciously, not with any real plan. But her eyes kept drifting to it, to the second-floor window where she'd seen a lamp being lit as the daylight faded. Was that his room? Was he up there right now having supper, not thinking about the dirty Chinese girl he'd given water to? Probably. Why would he think about her? He'd done his good deed for the day. Eased his conscience. People like him, decent people with consciences, they helped strays because it made them feel good about themselves. She knew that. She wasn't stupid. But her hand kept reaching for the canteen. Well, well, look what we got here. The voice came from behind her. Male, young, mean. Mei Lin's stomach dropped. She turned slowly. Two of them. Boys, really, probably 17 or 18. Both dressed like cowboys, though she doubted either one had done a real day's work in their lives. Rich kids playing at being rough. The kind who got mean when they were bored. The taller one was grinning. Thought you moved on. Guess you're stupider than you look. The shorter one, darker-haired and meaner-eyed, took a step closer. You know you ain't supposed to be here, right? This is a respectable town. Mei Lin didn't respond. Didn't move. Prey instinct. Maybe if she stayed still enough, they'd lose interest. I'm talking to you, China girl. Leave me alone, she said quietly. Leave me alone, the tall one mimicked in a high-pitched, mocking voice. His friend laughed. You got some nerve, the dark-haired one said. Sitting here all week, stinking up the town. People are starting to talk. Starting to wonder why nobody's run you off yet. I'll leave, Mei Lin said. Tomorrow. I'll leave tomorrow. Nah. He smiled, and it was the worst kind of smile. See, the thing is, we don't believe you. We think you're going to stick around, keep making the place look bad. So we're here to give you some encouragement. The tall one pulled out a flask, took a drink, offered it to his friend, who also drank. Liquid courage. This was going to get worse. Pretty face under all that dirt, the tall one said, squinting at her. Bet she'd clean up nice. Don't matter what she looks like, the dark-haired one said. She ain't people. They were getting closer. Mei Lin's heart was hammering. The alley behind her was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. If she ran, they'd catch her in seconds. If she screamed, nobody would come. She'd learned that lesson already. So she did the only thing she could do. She made herself smaller, wrapped her arms around herself, lowered her head, became invisible. What's going on here? The voice cut through the air like a blade. Not loud, but absolute. The kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. Cole Turner stepped around the corner, his tall frame filling the narrow space. His coat was unbuttoned, his hand resting, casually, but noticeably, on the grip of the revolver at his hip. The two boys froze. Nothing, the dark-haired one said quickly. Just having a conversation. Didn't look like a conversation. Cole's eyes moved to Mei Lin. You all right? She nodded, didn't trust her voice. See? The tall one spread his hands. Everything's fine. We were just leaving, Cole finished. You were just leaving. Now hold on. Wasn't a suggestion. The weight in his voice could have cracked stone. The boys exchanged glances, trying to decide if they were brave enough to push back. Cole just waited, patient and immovable as a mountain. The dark-haired one broke first. Come on, Jake. Ain't worth it. Yeah, Jake muttered. Yeah, all right. They backed away, trying to salvage their dignity with muttered curses and hard looks. But they left. And Cole stood there, watching until they disappeared around the corner. Only then did he turn back to Mei Lin. You hurt? She shook her head. They've been bothering you before? Sometimes. His jaw tightened. They touch you? No. Good. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he just stood there, giving her space to breathe, to stop shaking. After a moment, he said, You got somewhere to sleep tonight? The question was gentle, non-threatening, but Mei Lin still felt her defenses slam up. I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I don't need... I know, he interrupted quietly. You don't need help. You don't need anything. I heard you the first time. He paused. But it's going to freeze tonight, and those boys will come back once they get enough whiskey in them to feel brave again. So I'm not asking if you need help. I'm asking if you got somewhere safe to sleep. Mei Lin's throat felt tight. She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him she had a place, friends, options. But the words wouldn't come. No, she whispered finally. Cole nodded, like he'd already known, like he'd been waiting for her to admit it. All right, he said. Here's what's going to happen. I got a room at the boarding house, too small for 2 people, but there's a stable out back. It's warm, clean hay, door locks from the inside. You can sleep there tonight. I can't. You can. Mrs. Patterson won't mind. I already asked. Mei Lin stared at him. Why would you ask? Because I figured you'd need it. The simplicity of that answer stunned her. He'd thought ahead, planned for her. A stranger. A stray. Why? She wanted to ask, but she was afraid of the answer, afraid it would be pity, or worse, that it would be genuine kindness and she wouldn't know what to do with it. Come on, Cole said, already turning, before it gets full dark. Mei Lin didn't move. Every instinct she had screamed at her not to follow strange men to isolated places. Those instincts had kept her alive. But she was so tired, so cold, and something in his eyes, in the way he'd stood between her and those boys without hesitation, without asking for anything, made her want to trust him, just this once. She stood up. Her legs were stiff from sitting so long, her muscles aching from cold and hunger. She swayed slightly. Cole's hand moved, instinctive, reaching to steady her, but he stopped himself. Remembered. Don't touch me. I'm filthy. He let his hand drop. You can lean on the wall if you need to, he said instead. She did. Made it to her feet. Made it to standing. All right, Cole said. Follow me. And if those boys show up again, you get behind me. Understand? Mei Lin nodded. They walked through Red Willow as the last light bled from the sky. People were heading home, locking up shops, lighting lamps in windows. Normal evening sounds. Normal lives. Nobody looked at them. Nobody except Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner, who watched from her window as Cole led Mei Lin around to the stable. The old woman's face was unreadable, but she didn't come out, didn't stop them. The stable was exactly what Cole had promised, warm, clean, filled with fresh hay. There were 2 horses in the stalls, including Cole's big roan. They whickered softly as they entered. Door locks, Cole said, demonstrating. Windows are too high for anyone to climb through. You'll be safe here. Mei Lin looked around. It was the nicest place she'd slept in months. Thank you, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Cole tipped his hat. Get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning. He was almost to the door when she spoke again. Why are you doing this? He paused, turned back. In the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls, his scar was a shadow across his face. Because somebody should have done it 6 days ago, he said simply. Then he left, closing the door behind him. Mei Lin stood alone in the stable, surrounded by the smell of hay and horses and safety. She listened to his footsteps fade, listened to the night settle over Red Willow. Then, slowly, she sank down into the hay. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept without fear. Morning came too early and too bright. Mei Lin woke to sunlight cutting through the gaps in the stable walls, thin golden blades that fell across her face and made her eyes sting. For a moment, one blessed, confused moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then awareness crept back in layers, the scratch of hay against her cheek, the smell of horses and leather, the ache in her bones from sleeping on something that wasn't cold ground. The stable. She was in the stable. She sat up slowly, brushing straw from her hair. Her body protested every movement. Sleeping warm had somehow made everything hurt worse, like her muscles had finally relaxed enough to realize how much damage they'd been carrying. Outside, she could hear Red Willow waking up, voices calling to each other, the rattle of wagon wheels, the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer already starting up. Normal sounds. Morning sounds. She stood carefully, testing her legs. They held. Barely, but they held. The door rattled. Mei Lin's heart jumped into her throat. She backed against the far wall, eyes locked on the entrance. "It's me," came Cole's voice. "Can I come in?" She exhaled. "Yes." The door swung open and he stepped inside, bringing cold morning air with him. He was already dressed, already looked like he'd been up for hours. In one hand he carried a bundle wrapped in brown cloth. "Morning," he said. "You sleep all right?" "Yes." The word felt inadequate. She'd slept better than all right. She'd slept like the dead. "Good." He set the bundle down on a hay bale. "Brought you something." Maylin eyed it warily. "What is it?" "Breakfast, and some other things." He stepped back, giving her space. "Go ahead, open it." She moved forward slowly, like approaching a trap. The cloth fell away to reveal a plate with biscuits, bacon, and eggs that were somehow still warm. Next to the food was a bar of soap, a towel, and a brush. A brush. Maylin stared at it. When was the last time she'd seen a brush? When was the last time she'd needed one? "Mrs. Patterson sent the food," Cole said. "The rest is from me. Figured you might want to, I don't know, clean up if you wanted to." She picked up the soap. It smelled like lavender. Such a simple thing, such a normal thing. It made her throat tight. "I can't pay you back," she said. "Didn't ask you to." "Then why does there have to be a reason?" He sounded genuinely curious. Can a person just help another person? In Maylin's experience, no. There was always a reason, always a price. But looking at Cole's face, open, patient, waiting, she couldn't see the angle. Couldn't see what he wanted from her. Maybe that scared her more than if she could. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "There's a water pump out back. I'll stand watch while you use it. Make sure nobody bothers you. Take your time." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Maylin, you don't have to keep hiding. Not here." She looked up sharply. "I never told you my name." "I know, but you look like you needed someone to know it anyway." Then he was gone, pulling the door shut behind him. Maylin stood alone with her soap and her brush and her breakfast, trying to remember how to breathe around the fists squeezing her chest. He'd called her by name, like she was a person, like she mattered. She ate the food first, not because she wanted to, but because her body demanded it. The eggs were good, the bacon was better. The biscuits were so far beyond anything she'd tasted in months that she had to eat them slowly, had to force herself not to cry over something as stupid as bread. When she was done, she picked up the soap and towel and brush, stood there holding them like foreign objects, like relics from a life that used to be hers. The water pump was exactly where Cole had said it would be, tucked behind the stable in a small yard enclosed by a fence. Cole stood by the gate, his back to her, his hand resting casually on his gun belt, keeping watch, keeping his word. Maylin had been dirty for so long that clean seemed like a fantasy. She'd stopped thinking about it, stopped wanting it. Dirt was armor. Dirt kept her safe. But standing there with the soap in her hand and the morning sun warm on her shoulders, she couldn't remember why that had seemed true. She started with her hands. The water was shockingly cold, pulling a gasp from her chest. But she worked the soap into her palms anyway, scrubbing at the grime embedded in every line and crease. The water ran gray, then brown, then finally something close to clear. Her hands emerged pale and unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else. She moved to her face next. That was harder. She had to be careful around her eyes, gentle with skin that hadn't been properly washed in so long, it had forgotten what gentle meant. The dirt came away in layers, dust and sweat and road grime mixing with the soap into a dark paste that dripped onto the ground. When she finally stopped, gasping from the cold, her face felt raw, exposed, like she'd peeled away more than just dirt. Her hair was the real battle. It had been matted for weeks, maybe months. She couldn't remember the last time she'd actually brushed it. Couldn't remember the last time she'd cared. Now, holding the brush Cole had given her, she didn't even know where to start. She started at the ends, worked in small sections, patient even when her arms ached, even when the tangles seemed impossible. The brush caught and pulled, and she bit her lip against the pain, refusing to stop. Strand by strand, inch by inch, her hair began to remember what it used to be. It took forever. The sun climbed higher, her arms burned, but she kept going. When she finally stopped, breathing hard, her hair hung loose and clean down her back, still damp from the pump water, still not perfect. She could feel places where it wanted to tangle again, where the damage went too deep to fix with one brushing, but it was hers again. She wrapped the towel around her shoulders and turned to find Cole still standing guard, still facing away. He hadn't looked once, hadn't tried to sneak a glance or make her feel watched. "I'm done," she said. He turned around and stopped. His expression didn't change much. Cole wasn't the kind of man whose face gave away everything. But something flickered in his eyes, something that made Mei Lin suddenly acutely aware of how she must look. Still in rags, still too thin, still obviously exactly what she was, but clean. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, didn't trust her voice. "Good." He gestured toward the stable. "Your clothes are pretty worn. I was thinking we could see about getting you something else to wear. Nothing fancy, just—" "No." The word came out harder than she'd meant it to. Cole raised an eyebrow. "No? I can't." She pulled the towel tighter around herself. "I don't have money. I can't pay you back. I already owe you too much." "You don't owe me anything." "That's not how it works." Her voice was rising despite herself. "People don't just give things away. There's always a price. Always something they want back." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you think I want?" "I don't know." And that was the problem. That was what kept her up at night, what made her check exits and sleep with one eye open. Not knowing, not being able to see the trap before it closed. But there's always something. "All right." He crossed his arms. "Then let me tell you what I want. I want you to have clothes that don't have holes in them. I want you to sleep somewhere warm. I want you to eat regular meals. That's it. That's the whole list." "Why?" "Because I've been where you are." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "Different circumstances, maybe, but I know what it's like when the world decides you're not worth the dirt under its boots. And I know what it's like when someone shows up and gives a damn anyway. So that's what I'm doing. I'm giving a damn." Mei Lin stared at him, at the scar cutting across his face, at the way he held himself, like someone who'd learned to expect violence and didn't flinch from it anymore. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. "Long story." He uncrossed his arms. "Maybe I'll tell you sometime. But right now, I'm asking if you'll let me help. Not as payment, not as debt, just as one person to another person who could use a hand." Every instinct Mei Lin had screamed at her to say no, to run, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt her, but she was so tired of running. "Okay," she whispered. Cole nodded once. "Okay, let's go see what we can find." Red Willow looked different in full daylight, or maybe Mei Lin looked different. Either way, walking down the main street next to Cole instead of huddled against a wall, she noticed things she'd missed before. The way the buildings leaned slightly to the left, like they were tired. The faded paint on the general store sign. The way people's eyes slid away when they saw her, not with the blank dismissal of before, but with something more complicated. Confusion, maybe. Or surprise. She was clean now. That changed things. Morrison's general store was run by a thin man with wire spectacles and hands that never stopped moving. He looked up when they entered, his expression shifting from automatic welcome to carefully controlled neutrality when he saw Mei Lin. "Cole," he said, "what can I do for you?" "Need some supplies," Cole said easily. "Shirt, pants, something practical, women's size." Morrison's eyes flicked to Mei Lin, then away. "I don't carry much in the way of women's clothing. Most ladies have their own dressmakers. I'm not looking for a dress, just work clothes." Work clothes. Morrison said it like the words didn't quite make sense. "For her? That a problem?" The question was mild. The weight behind it was not. Morrison cleared his throat. "No, no problem. Let me see what I can find." He disappeared into the back room. Mei Lin stood very still, very quiet, trying to make herself small again out of habit. "You don't have to do that," Cole said without looking at her. "Do what?" "Shrink. You're allowed to take up space." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if she believed it. Morrison returned with an armful of clothing. "Best I can do. Might be a little big, but they'll work." Cole looked through the pile. A cotton shirt, canvas pants, a vest, socks. Simple, practical. Exactly what he'd asked for. "How much?" $3. It was too much. Mei Lin knew it was too much. She could see it in the way Morrison's jaw was set, in the slight edge to his voice. He was charging extra, punishing Cole for helping her. Cole pulled out the money without hesitation, laid it on the counter. "Appreciate it," he said. Outside, Mei Lin finally found her voice. He overcharged you. I know. Why didn't you say anything? Because it would have started a fight, and fighting with him wasn't going to change the price. Sometimes you just pay the tax and move on. The tax? The tax for being decent. Cole handed her the bundle of clothes. People charge it when they can't stop you from doing something but want to make you hurt for it anyway. Mei Lin held the clothes against her chest. They smelled like cotton and dye and possibility. Does it bother you, paying it? Not as much as walking past someone who needs help would. They walked back to the stable in silence. Mei Lin changed in one of the empty stalls, peeling off her rags and pulling on real clothes for the first time in forever. The shirt was too big. The pants needed a belt. But they were whole. Clean. Hers. When she emerged, Cole was waiting with a length of rope he'd fashioned into a makeshift belt. Not fancy, he said, handing it to her, but it'll keep your pants up. She took it, threaded it through the loops, tied it tight. Thank you, she said. Then, because the words felt too small, for all of it. You already thanked me. I know, but I don't know how else to. She trailed off, frustrated with her own inability to articulate what was happening in her chest. The strange, unfamiliar weight of gratitude mixed with fear, mixed with something that might have been hope if she was brave enough to name it. Cole seemed to understand anyway. You want to help? You can help me with something. With what? I need to fix a fence. Got hired to do it this morning. Old property on the edge of town. Could use an extra pair of hands if you're willing. Mei Lin blinked. You want me to work with you? If you're up for it. It's honest work. I can't pay you much, but I can split what I make. Fair trade for the help. Work. Real work. Not begging, not stealing, not trading pieces of herself she couldn't afford to lose. I can work, she said quickly. I'm strong. I can help. I know you can. He picked up a toolbox from the corner. Come on. Daylight's burning. The property was at the edge of Red Willow, where the buildings gave way to open land. The fence was old split rail, half of it rotted through or fallen over. The owner, a widow named Mrs. Chen who watched them from her porch with suspicious eyes, had hired Cole to rebuild it. You know what you're doing? Mrs. Chen asked when she saw Mei Lin. She's with me, Cole said simply. Mrs. Chen didn't look convinced, but she went back inside without further comment. The work was hard. Physical in a way Mei Lin's body wasn't ready for after weeks of near starvation. Her hands blistered within the first hour, her back ached, her arms trembled from lifting rails into place, but it felt good. It felt like something real, something that mattered. Cole worked steadily beside her, not saying much, but correcting her grip when she was about to hurt herself, showing her how to brace the posts so they'd hold. He didn't treat her like she was fragile, didn't coddle her or do all the heavy lifting himself. He worked and expected her to work, and somehow that was more respectful than any gentle handling would have been. By midday, they'd made real progress. The fence was taking shape, straight and solid and built to last. They stopped for water and a brief rest in the shade. You're good at this, Mei Lin said, gesturing at the fence. Cole shrugged. It's just fence work. No, I mean, you're good at seeing what needs to be done, at making things right. He took a long drink from his canteen. I spent a lot of years making things wrong. Figured I owed the world some balance. Is that how you got the scar? The question was out before she could stop it. She regretted it immediately. Too personal, too invasive. But Cole just ran a finger along the raised line on his face, thoughtful. This? No. This was after. This was when I was trying to make things right and somebody disagreed with my methods. Did you kill them? No. Did you want to? He looked at her then, really looked at her. Yeah, I wanted to, but wanting to and doing it are different things. That's the line I'm trying to stay on the right side of. Mei Lin understood that. The line. The constant calculation of how far you could bend before you broke. How much you could take before you became the thing you were running from. I've wanted to hurt people too, she admitted quietly. The men who, when they look at me like I'm not human, like I'm just something to use and throw away. I've wanted to make them bleed. Natural feeling. But I haven't. I know. How do you know? Because if you had, you wouldn't be sitting here feeling bad about wanting to. You'd be harder, colder. He set down his canteen. You've been through hell, Mei Lin, but you're still soft in the places that matter. That's not weakness. That's strength. She didn't feel strong. She felt tired and scared and so far from safe it hurt. But maybe strength wasn't about feeling strong. Maybe it was about surviving even when you felt like breaking. They worked until sunset. By the time they finished, the fence stood complete, solid and straight and true. Mrs. Chen inspected it with a critical eye, then nodded once. "Good work," she said. She paid Cole, then looked at Mei Lin. "You too. You did good work." It was the first compliment Mei Lin had received in longer than she could remember. It hit her harder than it should have. "Thank you," she managed. Walking back to town, Cole split the payment exactly down the middle. Mei Lin stared at the coins in her palm, more money than she'd held in months. "I didn't do half the work," she protested. "You did more than half the work. I just knew what I was doing." He pocketed his share. "Besides, this way you can start paying your own way. No debts, no favors, just your own earned money." The weight of the coins felt good, felt real. That night, Mei Lin didn't sleep in the stable. Cole had arranged for her to rent a tiny room at the boarding house. Nothing fancy, barely more than a closet with a bed, but it had a door that locked and a window that let in morning light. She lay in the narrow bed, clean and fed and employed, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt this close to human. It scared her. This feeling. This dangerous, fragile hope that maybe things could be different. That maybe she could be different, because hope meant you had something to lose. And Mei Lin had already lost so much. The nightmares came back on the third night. Mei Lin woke gasping in the dark, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The walls were wrong. The air smelled different. There was a ceiling above her instead of stars. Then memory clicked into place. The boarding house. Her room. Safe. Except she didn't feel safe. She sat up, pulling the thin blanket around her shoulders. The dream was already fading, leaving behind only fragments. Her mother's face, gray with fever. Wei's voice calling for her from somewhere she couldn't reach. The camp foreman's hands, the weight of dirt she'd caked onto her skin day after day, until she couldn't remember what clean felt like. But she was clean now. That was the problem. Being clean meant being visible. Being visible meant being vulnerable. For 2 years, dirt had been her shield. Now that shield was gone, and she felt naked, even fully clothed. She didn't sleep again that night, just sat by the window and watched Red Willow's empty streets until dawn started painting them gray. When she went downstairs for breakfast, Cole was already there. He took one look at her face and set down his coffee. "Rough night?" She nodded. "Want to talk about it?" "No." "Fair enough." He pushed a plate of eggs toward her. "Eat anyway. We got more fence work today if you're up for it." She was. The work helped. Kept her hands busy, her mind occupied. Made her too tired to think by the end of the day. They fell into a rhythm over the next week. Wake at dawn, breakfast at the boarding house, work, sometimes fences, sometimes hauling supplies for the general store, once helping to repair a barn roof that had partially collapsed under winter snow. The jobs were never glamorous, always physical, and Cole split every payment down the middle without her having to ask. Red Willow was starting to notice. Mei Lin could feel the shift in how people looked at her. Not acceptance exactly, that would have been too much to hope for, but something closer to grudging acknowledgement. She existed now in a way she hadn't before. She was the Chinese girl who worked with Cole Turner. That was an identity, at least, a place in the town's mental geography. Some people even spoke to her. "Morning," Mrs. Patterson said one day as Mei Lin passed through the boarding house lobby. Mei Lin nearly tripped. "Morning." It was such a small thing, such a normal thing, but it hit her like a gift. Not everyone was warming to her presence. The two boys who'd cornered her that first night, Jake and his dark-haired friend whose name she'd learned was Daniel, watched her with barely concealed resentment whenever their paths crossed. She could feel their eyes tracking her down the street, could hear the muttered comments they made just loud enough for her to catch. "Thinks she's something special now. Turner's pet project. Wonder how she's paying him back." The implication in that last one made her skin crawl. But she kept walking, kept her head up, kept pretending their words bounced off instead of burrowing in. Cole heard them too, she knew. She could see it in the way his jaw would tighten and how his hand would drift toward his gun, but he never confronted them, not in front of her. "They're just words," he said once when she asked why he let it slide. "I start a fight every time someone says something stupid. I'll never stop fighting." "Doesn't it bother you?" "Yeah, but there's a difference between being bothered and letting it control you. You can't live your life reacting to every piece of trash that blows past." Maylin tried to believe that, tried to let the comment slide off like he did, but every word stuck, adding to the weight she carried. On the 9th day, something changed. They were working on a project for the blacksmith, repairing a storage shed that had been damaged in a storm. Maylin was inside organizing tools while Cole worked on the roof. She heard voices outside, male voices. Familiar. Her stomach knotted. She edged to the doorway and looked out. Jake and Daniel were standing a few feet from the shed, arms crossed, watching Cole work. "That's some quality labor you got there, Turner," Jake called up. "Real professional." Cole didn't stop hammering. "You boys need something?" "Just wondering how long you plan on keeping your little charity case around, starting to make people uncomfortable." "What people?" "Decent people. People who don't want this town turning into a refuge for every stray that wanders in." Cole set down his hammer, climbed down from the roof with deliberate slowness. When he reached the ground, he was a full head taller than either of them. "You speak for the whole town now?" he asked mildly. "I speak for the people too polite to say what they're thinking," Jake said. His voice had an edge to it, trying for authority, landing somewhere closer to petulance. "That girl's trouble. She doesn't belong here." "Why? Because she's Chinese? Because she was down on her luck? What exactly makes her not belong?" Jake struggled for words. "She's not right. She's dirty. She's cleaner than you are." Daniel stepped forward, trying to back up his friend. "You know what he means. She's not one of us. And you taking her under your wing, treating her like she's something she's not, it's giving people the wrong idea." "What idea is that?" "That she matters." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mei Lin felt them settle in her chest, heavy and familiar. She'd heard variations of this speech her whole life. Different words, same message. You don't belong, you never will. Stop trying. But Cole's expression didn't change. He just looked at Daniel with something that might have been pity. "She does matter," he said quietly. "Same as you, same as me. That's not an idea. That's a fact." "That's bullshit," Jake spat. "You can dress her up, teach her to swing a hammer, pretend she's just like everybody else. But she's not. And everyone knows it, except you. Then everyone's wrong. You're making a mistake, Turner. People are talking. People are saying you've lost your perspective, that you're too soft on what?" Cole's voice dropped lower. Dangerous. "Say it. Go ahead. Tell me exactly what you think she is." Jake's mouth worked. But whatever slur he was about to throw out died when he met Cole's eyes. There was something in them that made even stupid boys with liquid courage think twice. "Thought so," Cole said. He turned away, dismissing them. "You boys are done here. Move along." "You can't tell us—" Cole turned back. The movement was fast enough to make them both flinch. "I'm not telling you," he said softly. "I'm asking nice. Once. You want to find out what happens if I have to ask twice?" They didn't. Jake made a show of spitting in the dirt. Daniel muttered something about this not being over, but they left, slunk away like dogs who'd been kicked. Cole stood there until they were gone. Then he picked up his hammer and climbed back onto the roof without a word. Maylin stayed in his doorway, shaking. Not from fear, from anger. From the sheer unfairness of existing in a world where people like Jake could decide she didn't matter and have that opinion treated like a reasonable position. "You all right?" Cole called down. "No." He climbed down again, slower this time. When he reached her, he didn't touch her. He never touched her without permission. But he stood close enough that she could feel his presence like a wall between her and the world. "Don't listen to them," he said. "Why not? They're saying what everyone thinks. They're saying what small minds think. There's a difference." "Is there?" Maylin heard her voice rising and couldn't stop it. "Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't matter if their minds are small or big. It doesn't matter if they're wrong. They still get to decide who belongs and who doesn't. They still get to make the rules. Only if you let them." "How do I not let them? How do I just exist in a place that doesn't want me without letting it tear me apart?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "You find one person who sees you, really sees you, and you hold on to that until you're strong enough to see yourself." "Is that what you did?" "Yeah." "Did it work?" He touched his scar. "Still working on it." The honesty in that answer steadied something in Maylin's chest. He wasn't pretending to have all the answers. Wasn't offering her empty platitudes or false promises. Just the truth. This was hard. It stayed hard. But you could survive it anyway. Thank you, she said, for what you said to them, for standing up. Didn't do it for thanks. Did it because it needed doing. Still, thank you. He nodded, started to turn back to work, then paused. You know what the worst part is about people like Jake and Daniel? What? They're scared. Deep down, they're terrified that if someone like you can matter, if someone they've been taught to look down on can be just as human as they are, then maybe the whole system they've built their lives around is a lie. And that scares them more than anything. So they fight it. They fight you. Because admitting you matter means admitting they've been wrong. And most people would rather die than admit they're wrong. Maylin thought about that. Does it get easier? Eventually? Some days it gets harder. He picked up his hammer. But you keep going anyway, that's all you can do. They worked until dark. When they finally called it a day, the blacksmith paid them and complimented their work. Didn't say anything about the confrontation earlier. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't care. Walking back to the boarding house, Maylin was exhausted. Her hands hurt. Her back hurt. But there was something else too. Something harder to name. A kind of defiance, maybe. A refusal to let Jake and Daniel's words define her. Cole? She said as they reached the front steps. Yeah? Why did you really help me, that first day? The real reason. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, you remember how I said I'd been where you were? Different circumstances? Yes. I was 17 when I killed my first man. The words came out flat, factual. He was beating my mother. I told him to stop. He didn't, so I shot him. Maylin's breath caught. Turned out he was the sheriff's cousin. Didn't matter that he was a drunk who hit women. Didn't matter that I was defending my mother. What mattered was that I'd killed a white man, and I was just some half-breed kid whose father nobody knew and whose mother worked in a saloon. He stared at the dark street. They were going to hang me. Would have too, except this preacher, old man named Samuel, he stood up at the trial. Said I'd acted in defense of another. Said I deserved mercy. Argued for an hour straight, while the whole town told him to shut up and let them get on with the hanging. What happened? They didn't hang me. Sent me to prison instead. I did 4 years. When I got out, first thing I did was look for Samuel. Found out he'd died 6 months prior. Heart gave out. Cole's voice went rough. Never got to thank him. Never got to pay him back for saving my life. So you're paying it forward. So I'm trying to be the person who stands up. Because if someone doesn't, if everyone just walks past and minds their own business, then people like Jake and Daniel get to decide what the world looks like. And I don't want to live in that world. Maylin understood then. Really understood. This wasn't about charity or pity or even kindness. This was about Cole refusing to let the worst parts of humanity win by default. I'm sorry, she said, about your mother, about all of it, ancient history. But his voice said it wasn't. Point is, you asked why I helped you. That's why. Because nobody should have to sit in the dirt and hope they turn invisible. And because someone helped me once when I needed it. Seems only fair to pass it along. They stood there in the cold darkness, two people shaped by cruelty trying to build something different out of the wreckage. I'm glad you didn't turn invisible, Maylin said quietly. Cole smiled, a small, sad thing. Yeah, me too. The next morning brought trouble of a different kind. Maylin woke to shouting. Not the normal morning sounds of Red Willow, but something sharper, angrier. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find a crowd gathered in the street. Cole was already there, standing on the edge of the group. She pushed through to reach him. What's happening? Someone broke into Morrison's store last night, took money from the register, some supplies. Maylin's blood went cold. She had a terrible feeling she knew where this was going. Sure enough, Morrison emerged from the crowd, his face red with anger. I'm telling you, it had to be her. Nobody else knew in town. Nobody else with reason to steal. That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Patterson said. The boarding house owner stood with her arms crossed, her expression stern. You got proof? I got common sense. Chinese girl shows up out of nowhere. Suddenly I'm getting robbed. That's not coincidence. It's not proof either, Cole said quietly. Morrison wheeled on him. Of course you'd defend her. Everyone knows you've been keeping her like some kind of pet. Watch your mouth. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Cole didn't raise his voice. Didn't have to. The warning in it was clear enough. Morrison faltered, but held his ground. I want my money back. I want justice. And I want that girl run out of town before she steals from someone else. She didn't steal anything, Cole said. How do you know? Because she was in her room all night. Mrs. Patterson can confirm it. All eyes turned to Mrs. Patterson. The old woman looked at Maylin for a long moment, her expression unreadable. That's right, she said finally. Girl's room is right under mine. I'd have heard if she'd gone out. She didn't. Morrison's face went even redder. You're all protecting her, all of you. But I know what I know, and I know this town was safer before she showed up. Your store getting robbed has nothing to do with her, Cole said. Could have been anyone. Could have been those boys who've been drinking themselves stupid every night at the saloon. Could have been someone passing through. You don't know. I know enough. The crowd was murmuring now, some people nodding along with Morrison, others looking uncertain. Maylin felt their eyes on her, judging, weighing, deciding her guilt or innocence based on nothing more than the color of her skin and the fact that she was an outsider. She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she thought about what Cole had said, about finding one person who sees you, about holding on until you're strong enough to see yourself. She stepped forward. I didn't steal from you, she said. Her voice shook but held. I didn't steal from anyone. I've been working, earning my own money. I don't need to steal. Morrison scoffed. Working? Doing what? Following Turner around like a lost dog? Building fences? Repairing buildings? Honest work. She lifted her chin. You can ask Mrs. Chen, ask the blacksmith, ask anyone I've worked for. I do my job. I don't steal. You're a liar and a thief. That's enough. Cole's voice cut through like a blade. He stepped between Maylin and Morrison. You make one more accusation without proof, we're going to have a problem. You threatening me? I'm stating facts. You got robbed. That's unfortunate. But you don't get to blame someone just because it's convenient. You want to find who actually did it? Go talk to the sheriff. But leave her out of it. Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Cole's stance, the way he stood perfectly still, perfectly balanced, hand resting casual, but ready near his gun, made him think better of it. Fine, he spat. But when something else goes missing, when this town realizes what you've brought into it, don't say I didn't warn you. He stalked off. The crowd began to disperse, some people casting backward glances at Maylin, others studiously avoiding looking at her at all. When it was just her and Cole and Mrs. Patterson, Maylin finally let herself breathe. Thank you, she said to Mrs. Patterson, for vouching for me. The old woman sniffed. I don't lie. You were in your room. That's just fact. She paused. Though I'll say this, you're either very unlucky or very brave to stay in a town that doesn't want you. Haven't decided which yet. Maybe both, Maylin said. Maybe. Mrs. Patterson turned to go, then stopped. That hair of yours is getting long, getting in your way. Come by my room tonight. I'll trim it for you. No charge. She left before Maylin could respond. Cole watched her go, then turned to Maylin. You all right? I don't know. She felt shaky, wrung out. Do you think they'll ever stop, looking at me like I'm something wrong? Some of them will, some won't. But here's what matters. You stood up. You spoke for yourself. That's not nothing. It doesn't feel like enough. It never does. But you keep doing it anyway. You keep showing up, keep proving them wrong just by existing and refusing to disappear. He touched her shoulder briefly, the first time he'd initiated contact since that first day. You're stronger than you think, Maylin. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel strong. Instead, she just felt tired. That evening, she went to Mrs. Patterson's room as instructed. The old woman sat her down in front of a mirror and began working through her hair with a comb. Hold still. Maylin held still, watched in the mirror as Mrs. Patterson's gnarled hands moved with surprising gentleness. You know what your problem is, Mrs. Patterson said after a while. I have a lot of problems. Your problem is you think you have to earn the right to exist. You don't. You just exist, whether people like it or not. She snipped carefully at the ends of Maylin's hair. That boy Jake? His father drinks away half his wages and beats his wife when he's angry. Daniel's family owes money to half the merchants in town and thinks they're too good to work it off. Morrison's been watering down his goods and overcharging for years. Every person in this town has dirt under their fingernails if you look close enough. But somehow, you're the one who's supposed to prove you're worthy of being here. Yeah, saw it, batika speni bobo. So what do I do? You stop trying to prove anything. You just live, do your work, pay your way. And if people don't like it, That's their problem, not yours. She finished with the scissors and stepped back. There. Better. Mei Lin looked at her reflection. Her hair was shorter now, just past her shoulders. Neat. Practical. It made her face look different. Older, maybe, or just more visible. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. Just remember what I said. You got as much right to breathe air and walk streets as anyone else. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Walking back to her room, Mei Lin thought about Mrs. Patterson's words, about rights and belonging, and the exhausting work of just existing. She thought about her mother, who'd crossed an ocean hoping for something better. She thought about Wei, who'd run toward possibility even though it meant leaving her behind. She thought about herself. 19 years old and so tired of fighting for scraps of dignity. But she was still here, still standing, still refusing to disappear. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. The trouble Mei Lin had been waiting for arrived exactly 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon when the sky was the color of old bruises and the wind carried the promise of rain. She was carrying supplies from Morrison's store to the blacksmith shop. Cole had gotten them another job, and Morrison had grudgingly agreed to sell them materials despite his obvious displeasure. The bag was heavy, full of nails and metal fittings, and Mei Lin was focused on not dropping it when she heard the footsteps behind her. Fast, purposeful, multiple sets. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She could feel Jake and Daniel's presence like a weight on her back. Hey, China girl. Mei Lin kept walking. The blacksmith shop was just another block. If she could make it there. A hand grabbed her shoulder and spun her around. The bag slipped from her grip, hitting the dirt with a heavy thud. Nails scattered across the ground like scattered teeth. Jake stood close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. Daniel flanked him, grinning that mean grin that said he'd been waiting for this. We're talking to you, Jake said. It's rude to ignore people. I have nothing to say to you. Mei Lin's voice came out steadier than she felt. Well, we got something to say to you. Jake took another step forward. See, we've been real patient, real tolerant. We let Turner play hero, let him parade you around like you're something other than what you are. But enough's enough. Cole said, Cole ain't here, Daniel cut in. His eyes were bright with something ugly. Saw him head out of town an hour ago. Won't be back till evening. So it's just us, just you and us having a little conversation. Mei Lin's heart kicked against her ribs. She looked around. The street wasn't empty. There were people nearby, going about their business. But no one was looking her way. No one ever looked her way unless they had to. I need to get these supplies to the blacksmith, she said, bending to pick up the bag. Jake kicked it away. Nails went flying. You need to listen when people are talking to you. His voice had an edge now, sharp and getting sharper. You need to understand something. You don't belong here. You never did. And us being nice about it, us letting you stay as long as you have, that was a courtesy. But you've worn out your welcome. I'm not going anywhere. The words surprised her even as she said them. A week ago, she would have run, would have packed what little she had and disappeared into the night. But something had changed. Something had hardened in her chest. I work here. I pay my own way. I have as much right to be here as you do. Jake's face went red. You have no rights. You're nothing. You're a stray dog that should have been run off the first day you showed up. Funny, Mei Lin said, her voice cold. Your father's a drunk who beats your mother. Daniel's family can't pay their debts, but somehow I'm the problem. Somehow I'm the one who doesn't deserve to be here. She saw the punch coming but couldn't move fast enough. Jake's fist caught her across the face, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded through her cheek and jaw. She stumbled, tasted blood. Watch your mouth, Jake snarled. Mei Lin straightened. Her face throbbed, but she forced herself to stand tall, to not show how much it hurt. That all you got? The words came from somewhere deep and reckless, somewhere that was tired of being scared. A sucker punch from a drunk son? That's supposed to make me leave? This time Daniel moved. He grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back. The pain was immediate and sharp. Mei Lin gasped but didn't cry out. You think you're tough now, Daniel hissed in her ear. You think because Turner treats you like a person, that makes you one? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. And the sooner you accept that, let her go. The voice came from behind them. Not Cole's voice. Older, female. Mrs. Patterson stood at the edge of the street, a shotgun cradled in her arms like it was an extension of her body. I said let her go, the old woman repeated. Now. Daniel released Mei Lin's arm. She stumbled forward, caught herself. "This ain't your business, Mrs. Patterson," Jake said, but his voice had lost its edge. "You're assaulting someone in the middle of my street. That makes it my business." She raised the shotgun slightly, not pointing it at them. Not yet. But the threat was clear. "You boys got about 5 seconds to get out of my sight before I decide you're worth the buckshot." "You wouldn't try me." Something in her eyes said she absolutely would. Jake and Daniel must have seen it too, because they backed away. Slowly at first, then faster. "This isn't over," Jake threw back over his shoulder. "Yes, it is," Mrs. Patterson called after them. "You come near this girl again, you'll deal with me. And trust me, boys, I'm a lot meaner than Cole Turner when I'm angry." They disappeared around a corner. Mrs. Patterson lowered the shotgun and walked over to where Mei Lin stood, still shaking. "You hurt bad?" Mei Lin touched her face. Her fingers came away bloody. "I'll live. That's the spirit." Mrs. Patterson bent down and started collecting scattered nails. "Help me pick these up. Can't let good supplies go to waste." They worked in silence for a few minutes. When the nails were gathered and the bag repacked, Mrs. Patterson studied Mei Lin's face with a critical eye. "That's going to bruise. Come on back to the boarding house. I'll clean it up before Cole sees. He's going to see eventually." "I know. But there's a difference between seeing a cleaned wound and seeing you standing in the street bleeding. One makes a man concerned. The other makes him stupid." She started walking. "Come on. And next time those boys bother you, you scream. Scream loud enough to wake the dead. Don't you ever let someone hurt you in silence." In Mrs. Patterson's room, the old woman worked with efficient, no-nonsense movements. She cleaned the cut on Mei Lin's cheek with water that stung and pressed a cold cloth to the swelling. Her hands were surprisingly gentle. "Why did you help me?" Mei Lin asked. "You don't even like me." "I never said I didn't like you." Mrs. Patterson wrung out the cloth, pressed it back to Mei Lin's face. "I said I hadn't decided if you were brave or unlucky. Still haven't. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and watch 2 drunk idiots beat on a girl half their size." "Most people would. Most people are cowards." She stepped back, examining her work. "That'll do. Keep the cloth on it for another 10 minutes. And don't let those boys see you flinch. They smell weakness like dogs smell fear." "I don't know how to not be weak." Mrs. Patterson laughed, short and sharp. "Girl, you've survived things that would have killed most people twice your age. You crossed an ocean, lost your family, lived on the streets, and you're still standing here talking to me. That's not weakness. That's steel wrapped in skin." "I don't feel like steel." "Nobody does. That's the secret they don't tell you. Everyone's scared, everyone's weak. The difference is some people keep moving anyway." There was a knock at the door. Heavy. Urgent. Mrs. Patterson opened it to reveal Cole. His eyes went immediately to Mei Lin, to the cloth pressed against her face, to the careful way she was holding herself. "What happened?" His voice was flat. Dangerous. "Jake and Daniel happened," Mrs. Patterson said, "but I handled it." "Are you hurt?" This directed at Mei Lin. "I'm fine." "That's not what I asked." Mei Lin lowered the cloth. Knew he could see the cut, the swelling, the bruise already forming. Cole's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold and hard. "Where are they?" "Probably at the saloon by now," Mrs. Patterson said. "And before you go doing something stupid, consider that the girl here held her own, didn't back down, didn't run. She faced them, and when I showed up, they were the ones who looked scared." Cole looked at Mei Lin. "That true?" She nodded. "I told them I wasn't leaving, that I had as much right to be here as they did. And then they hit you." "Yes." "Did you hit back?" "I wanted to, but there were 2 of them and—" She stopped, realized what she was doing, making excuses, explaining why she hadn't fought. "No, I didn't hit back." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Next time hit back." "What?" "You heard me. Next time someone puts their hands on you, you make them regret it. You understand?" "Cole," Mrs. Patterson started. "No." He held up a hand. "I'm not saying go looking for fights. I'm saying if someone brings a fight to you, you don't just stand there and take it. You fight back. Even if you lose. Especially if you lose. Because then they know you're not easy. They know there's a cost." He looked at Mei Lin. "You're allowed to defend yourself. You're allowed to make people hurt for hurting you." Mei Lin thought about her mother, who taught her to be quiet, to be small, to not cause trouble because trouble got you killed. Then she thought about standing in the street, tasting blood, and refusing to run. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Cole turned to Mrs. Patterson. "Thank you for stepping in." "Someone had to. You weren't here." There was no accusation in her voice, just fact. "I know. That's my fault. Should have been." He looked back at Mei Lin. "I'm going to have a conversation with those boys." "Don't," Mei Lin said quickly. "Don't make it worse." "I'm not making anything worse. I'm making something clear. There's a difference. If you fight them, if you make them look bad in front of the whole town, they'll just come after me harder when you're not around. Then I'll make sure I'm always around. You can't be, and I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for you to rescue me." The words came out harder than she meant, but they were true. "I appreciate everything you've done. I do. But if I'm going to stay here, if I'm going to actually live here and not just survive, I need to fight my own battles." Cole studied her face. "That what you want?" "Yes." "All right, then we'll do it your way. But if they come at you again, if they so much as look at you wrong, you tell me. Promise." "I promise." He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I think you're braver than you know. And I think those boys just learned that bruising is easier than breaking." After he left, Mrs. Patterson made Mei Lin tea and sat her down at the small table by the window. "You handled that well," the old woman said. "Not letting him charge off like some knight. That shows sense. It shows fear. I'm scared of what happens if he fights for me. Scared of making things worse. Fear and sense aren't opposites. Often, they're the same thing." She poured the tea. "You've been here 2 weeks now, starting to put down roots whether you mean to or not." "I don't know if I'm staying. Don't know if I can." "Why not?" "Because," Mei Lin struggled to articulate it, "because every day feels like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every morning I wake up expecting to be run out of town. Every night I go to sleep wondering if tomorrow's the day something breaks. That's just life, girl. Nobody gets guarantees. You think I knew this boarding house would still be standing 20 years after I opened it? You think Cole knew he'd end up in a nothing town trying to save stray souls?" She shook her head. "We're all just making it up as we go. Difference is, some people let that uncertainty paralyze them. Others use it as permission to try." Mei Lin sipped her tea. It was bitter and hot and grounding. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if you are?" The question sat between them like a challenge. That night, Mei Lin couldn't sleep. Her face ached despite the salve Mrs. Patterson had given her. But it wasn't the pain keeping her awake. It was something else. Something that felt like a decision being made in the quiet parts of her mind. She got up, pulled on her coat, went down to the empty street. Red Willow at night was a different creature than Red Willow by day. Quieter, darker, more honest somehow. The facades people wore during daylight hours fell away, and what remained was just a collection of buildings trying not to collapse. Mei Lin walked to the edge of town where the last building gave way to open land. She could see stars out here, thousands of them, cold and distant and indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath them. She thought about her mother, about the hopes she'd carried across an ocean, about how those hopes had died slowly in a railroad camp with no doctor and no medicine and no mercy. She thought about Wei, about whether he was alive somewhere, whether he'd made it, whether he ever thought about the sister he'd left behind. She thought about herself at 12, at 14, at 16. All the versions of herself that had been carved away by necessity and survival. All the softness she'd had to shed to stay alive. And she thought about the girl she'd been 2 weeks ago, filthy and starving, and so convinced of her own worthlessness that she'd tried to make herself invisible. That girl was gone. She'd washed away with the dirt and the grime and the armor of ugliness. What remained was harder to define, harder to hide behind. "Figured I'd find you here." Mei Lin turned. Cole stood a few feet away, his coat collar turned up against the cold. "Couldn't sleep?" "Never can." He came to stand beside her, close enough to talk, far enough to respect her space. "How's the face?" "Hurts?" "Good." She looked at him sharply. "Good? Means you're feeling it. Means you're not numb yet. Being numb is worse than hurting." He looked out at the darkness. "I went to the saloon earlier, had a conversation with Jake and Daniel. I asked you not to, I didn't fight them, just talked, explained some things, made sure they understood the consequences if they bothered you again. And they heard me." Whether they listened remains to be seen. He was quiet for a moment. You were right, though, about needing to fight your own battles. I can't always be there, and even if I could, that wouldn't help you. It would just make you dependent. So what do? You learn to hit back. Really hit back. Not just with your fists, though we can work on that too if you want, but with your words, your presence, your refusal to disappear. He glanced at her. You did good today, standing up to them, not backing down. That's the first step. What's the second step? Making them believe you mean it. Making them understand that you're not going anywhere, and the more they push, the deeper you're going to dig in. Maylin considered that. You make it sound simple. It's not. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's worth it. Because the alternative is spending your whole life running, and eventually you run out of places to run to. She knew he was right, knew she'd already run as far as she could go. Red Willow wasn't perfect. It wasn't even particularly welcoming, but it was the first place she'd stopped running, the first place she'd allowed herself to be seen. Cole? What you said earlier about me being braver than I know, did you mean that? Yeah. Why? I don't feel brave. I feel terrified most of the time. That's what makes it brave. Being scared and doing it anyway. He turned to face her. You want to know what I see when I look at you? She nodded. I see someone who survived things that would have killed me. I see someone who's been beaten down and told she's worthless and still gets up every morning and keeps going. I see someone who's learning to stand when every instinct says to hide. He paused. That's not weakness, Maylin. That's the definition of strength. She felt something crack in her chest, not breaking, opening. I'm tired, she said quietly. I'm so tired of being strong, of having to prove I deserve to exist. I know. When does it stop? When do I get to just be? I don't know. But I know it starts with deciding that you're done asking permission. Done waiting for the world to give you permission to matter. You just matter, period. And anyone who says different can go to hell. Maylin laughed despite herself. It came out wet and shaky, but real. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, but it's simple. You just decide, and then you live like you've decided. They stood there for a while longer, watching the stars wheel overhead. Two broken people trying to build something whole out of the pieces they had left. Finally, Cole said, Come on, it's late, and you've got work tomorrow. We have work tomorrow. That's what I said. Walking back to the boarding house, Maylin felt something shift inside her, a decision being made, a line being drawn. She was done running. She was done hiding. Red Willow might not want her, but she was staying anyway. She would work. She would pay her way. She would stand in the open and dare the world to tell her she didn't belong. And if Jake and Daniel came at her again, she would hit back. Maybe she'd lose. Probably she would. But they would know they'd been in a fight. They would know there was a cost to making her bleed. She would make sure they knew. The next morning, Maylin woke before dawn. Her face was a mess of purple and yellow bruising, the cut on her cheek scabbed over and ugly. She looked at herself in the small mirror above her wash basin and didn't flinch. This was her face, her skin, her body that had survived. She got dressed, went downstairs, found Cole already waiting with coffee and breakfast. Morning, he said, handing her a cup. Morning. He studied her face. How's it feel? Like I got punched by an angry drunk. But I'll live. Good. He set down his own cup. I've been thinking. Those boys are going to keep pushing until something gives. And I'd rather it be us that does the pushing. What do you mean? I mean, we don't wait for them to come to us. We go about our business. We work. We exist. And we do it so visibly, so undeniably, that the whole town has to acknowledge you're here. Not as my charity case. Not as someone who's being tolerated. As someone who belongs. How do we do that? By living like we've already won. He smiled. It was a small, hard smile. By acting like your place here is so obvious, so settled, that anyone who questions it looks like a fool. Maylin thought about that. About the power of simply existing without apology. All right, she said, let's do it. They spent that day working on a new project, building a chicken coop for a widow on the south end of town. The woman was wary at first, kept glancing at Maylin with uncertain eyes. But as the day wore on and the coop took shape, her wariness faded. You're good with your hands, she said to Maylin at one point. Thank you. Where'd you learn? from watching, from doing, from making mistakes and trying again. The widow nodded slowly. That's the only way to learn anything worth knowing. By the end of the day, the coop was finished. The widow paid them and offered Maylin a basket of apples from her tree. Take them. You earned them. Maylin took the basket, felt the weight of it in her hands. Such a simple thing, such a normal thing. Being paid for work with money and apples and respect. Walking back through town, they passed Jake and Daniel lounging outside the saloon. The boys watched them with hard eyes. Maylin met their gaze and didn't look away, didn't flinch, just kept walking with her basket of apples and her bruised face and her head held high. She saw something flicker in Jake's expression. Uncertainty, maybe. Or the first shadow of doubt. Good. Let him doubt. Let him wonder if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as easy to break as he'd thought. That night, Maylin sat in her room and ate an apple. It was crisp and sweet and tasted like victory. The confrontation Maylin had been bracing for came on a Thursday, 3 weeks after that first basket of apples, in the middle of Red Willow's main street where everyone could see. She'd been carrying lumber from the mill to a construction site when she heard the familiar voices behind her. This time she didn't tense, didn't quicken her pace, just kept walking. "Still here, I see," Jake's voice. Slurred at the edges despite it being barely noon, Maylin set down the lumber carefully and turned to face them. Jake and Daniel stood 5 feet away, flanked by 2 other boys she recognized from the saloon. Safety in numbers. Cowards always traveled in packs. "I'm here," she said, her voice steady. "And I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that." Big words for someone who got their face rearranged last time we talked. Jake took a step forward. People on the street were stopping now, watching. "Thought you'd have learned your lesson." "I did learn. I learned that you hit like a drunk. All wind, no power." The insult landed. She saw it in how Jake's face went red, how his fists clenched. Good. Let him be angry. Angry people made mistakes. "You got a mouth on you now," Daniel said. "Turner teach you that?" "Nobody taught me. I just stopped pretending to be smaller than I am to make cowards feel big." One of the other boys, thin, with a face like a weasel, laughed nervously. "She's got you there, Jake." Jake wheeled on him. "Shut up, Tommy." Then back to Maylin. "You think you're tough? You think because you got one old woman with a shotgun and a has-been gunfighter watching your back that makes you something? No, what makes me something is that I'm still standing, that every day you try to make me disappear, and every day I show up anyway. That's what makes me something you can't handle." She was pushing. Knew she was pushing, but she was tired of waiting for them to make the first move. Tired of living defensively. If there was going to be a fight, she wanted it now. Here, where witnesses could see who started it. "You want to hit me?" she continued. "Go ahead, do it in front of everyone. Show the whole town what brave men you are. 4 against 1. I'm sure your fathers will be real proud." "Don't you talk about my father," Jake snarled. "Why? Everyone else does. Everyone knows he drinks himself stupid and beats your mother bloody. Everyone knows that's where you learn to punch women, from watching him." Jake lunged. Maylin was ready. She'd been ready for weeks. Cole had spent evenings teaching her not how to win a fight, but how to survive one, how to protect her head, how to make a fist without breaking her thumb, how to go for vulnerable spots. She ducked under Jake's wild swing and drove her fist into his stomach. Not hard enough to do real damage, but hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He stumbled back, gasping. "You bitch!" Daniel came at her from the side. She tried to turn but wasn't fast enough. His fist caught her shoulder, spinning her around. Pain shot down her arm. She staggered but didn't fall. The other 2 boys were moving now, circling. This was it. This was where she'd lose. 4 against 1, she'd never had a chance. But at least she'd made them work for it. At least she'd... "That's enough." Cole's voice cut through the chaos like a knife. He stepped out of the crowd that had gathered, moving with that deliberate slowness that was somehow more threatening than rushing. He positioned himself between Maylin and the boys, his hand resting on his gun. But before anyone could speak, Mrs. Patterson appeared on the other side, still holding that shotgun like it was part of her daily outfit. Then the blacksmith stepped forward. Then Mrs. Chen. Then the widow who'd paid them in apples. One by one, people moved. Not everyone, not even most. But enough. Enough to make a wall of bodies between Maylin and the boys who wanted her gone. "You want to get to her," Mrs. Patterson said calmly. "You're going to have to go through us first. Jake looked around wildly. This is insane. You're protecting her? She's nothing. She's a person who works hard and pays her way, the blacksmith said. His voice was gravelly, rough from years of shouting over forge noise. Which is more than I can say for you lot. When's the last time any of you did an honest day's work? That's not the point, Daniel said, but his voice had lost its edge. She doesn't belong here. She's not one of us. Neither was I when I got here 30 years ago, Mrs. Chen said quietly. Neither were half the people in this town. We all came from somewhere else. We all started as strangers. That's different. No, Cole interrupted. It's not. You just want it to be different because it's easier to hate someone who looks different than to admit you're looking for someone to blame for your own miserable lives. The words hung in the air, raw, true, ugly. Jake's mouth worked, but no sound came out. He looked at the faces around him, at the people who'd lived in Red Willow longer than he'd been alive, at the shopkeepers and craftsmen and widows who decided for whatever reason that Mei Lin was worth standing for. This isn't over, he said finally. But it sounded hollow, like he knew it was. Yeah, it is, Cole said. You come after her again, you deal with all of us. And son, you don't want that fight. The boys backed away. Slowly at first, trying to salvage some dignity, then faster as the crowd's eyes stayed on them, judging them, finding them wanting. When they were gone, the crowd began to disperse, back to their shops, their work, their lives. But several people stopped to speak to Mei Lin first. You did good standing up to them, the blacksmith said. Brave girl, Mrs. Chen added. Stubborn, more like, Mrs. Patterson corrected. But stubborn's what you need in this world. When it was just Mei Lin and Cole, she realized she was shaking, adrenaline draining away, leaving exhaustion in its wake. You okay? Cole asked. I hit him. She looked at her hand. Her knuckles were scraped and already swelling. I actually hit him. You did. It felt good. It usually does. First time, anyway. He took her hand gently, examining her knuckles. You're going to want to ice this, and next time tuck your thumb outside your fingers when you make a fist. You're lucky you didn't break it. Next time? There's always a next time. Maybe not with them, but with someone. The world's full of people who think they can push others around. He released her hand. But you stood your ground. That's what matters. I couldn't have done it without you, without everyone who stepped up. Maybe. But they stepped up because you'd already proven yourself worth stepping up for. You did that. You earned that. Mei Lin looked down the street where the boys had disappeared. She didn't feel victorious, didn't feel strong, just tired and sore and grateful it was over. But it wasn't over. Not really. She knew that. The real test came 2 weeks later. Mei Lin was working alone at a job site. Cole had gone to the next town over to pick up supplies and wouldn't be back until evening. She was repairing a fence when she heard horses. 3 of them. The riders were men she didn't recognize, older than Jake and Daniel, harder looking. She stood up slowly, hammer still in her hand. Help you, gentlemen? The lead rider, a man with a scar across his throat and eyes like chips of flint, smiled without warmth. Heard there was a Chinese girl working in Red Willow, wanted to see for ourselves. You've seen. I'm working. Got nothing else to say. Unfriendly. The man dismounted. His companions followed. We're looking for someone. Chinese boy, about 15 now. Ran away from a railroad camp couple years back. Thought maybe you'd know something about that. Mei Lin's heart stopped. Wei. They were asking about Wei. I don't know anything about any railroad camp, she said carefully. That's funny, because we heard you came from one yourself. Heard you had family there. A brother, maybe? I don't have a brother. It hurt to say. Hurt worse than any punch. But she said it firm and didn't let her voice shake. The man studied her. See, the thing is, that boy stole from the camp when he ran. Not much. Just enough to make it our business to find him. And we've been tracking him for a while now. Trail led us here. Well, he's not here. You sure about that? I'm sure there's nothing in Red Willow for you, so you can get back on your horses and leave. The man's smile widened. Got some spine on you. I like that. But here's the thing. We're not leaving without answers. And if you can't give us answers about the boy, maybe you can give us answers about yourself. How'd you end up here? Who's paying your way? You working off a debt, or you just spreading your legs for... The hammer flew before Mei Lin consciously decided to throw it. It didn't hit the man. Her aim wasn't that good. But it came close enough to make him jerk back. Get out, she said. Her voice was shaking now, but not with fear, with rage. "Get out of this town before I find someone with a gun and better aim than I have with a hammer." The man's eyes went cold. "You just made a mistake, girl." He started toward her, then stopped. Mrs. Patterson stood at the edge of the property, shotgun raised and aimed. But she wasn't alone. Behind her stood half a dozen townspeople. The blacksmith with his forge hammer, Mrs. Chen with a pistol that looked too big for her small hands, Morrison from the general store with a rifle, even Tommy, the weasel-faced boy who'd been with Jake and Daniel, holding a length of wood like a club. "She told you to leave," Mrs. Patterson said. "So leave." The scarred man looked at the assembled group. Did the math. 3 against 7, and the 7 had the weapons and the high ground. "This isn't worth the trouble," he muttered to his companions. Then louder, to Mei Lin, "If you see that boy, you tell him we're still looking. Tell him there's nowhere far enough to run." They mounted their horses and rode out. Mei Lin stood frozen, watching until they disappeared. "You all right?" Mrs. Patterson asked, lowering the shotgun. Mei Lin nodded, couldn't speak yet. "Who were they really looking for?" the blacksmith asked. "My brother." The words came out before she could stop them. "They were looking for my brother." "Is he here?" "No, I don't know where he is. Haven't seen him in 2 years." She looked at the assembled group. "Why did you come? How did you know?" "Tommy saw the riders heading this way," Morrison said gruffly. "Came and told us. Figured if they were strangers looking for trouble, you might need help." Tommy ducked his head, embarrassed. "Figured I owed you one. For what Jake did. For what I didn't stop." Mei Lin stared at them. At these people who decided she was worth defending. Not because they liked her particularly, not because she was special, but because she was part of Red Willow now, and Red Willow looked after its own. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank us yet," Mrs. Patterson said. "Those men might come back. And if your brother does show up here, we need to know about it, need to know what kind of trouble's following. He won't come here. He doesn't know I'm here. Doesn't even know if I'm alive." "But you hope he is," Mrs. Chen said gently. "You hope he's alive somewhere." Mei Lin nodded, felt tears threatening, and blinked them back. "Then we'll hope with you," the widow said. "And if he does show up, if he finds his way here, we'll figure it out. Together." That night, Cole returned to find Mei Lin sitting on the boarding house steps, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her without a word. Just sat there, present and solid and real. After a while, she told him about the men, about Wei, about all of it. Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "You did the right thing, not telling them anything. What if he's in trouble? What if he needs help and You protected him. That's what you did. Those men weren't looking to reunite a family. They were looking to punish someone for having the audacity to want freedom." He was quiet a moment. "Your brother's alive or he's not. You can't control that. But you can control whether or not you lead hunters to him." "I miss him," Mei Lin whispered. "I miss them all. My mother, my father. Wei. I miss who I was when they were alive. I know. When does it stop hurting?" "It doesn't, not completely, but it gets easier to carry. The weight doesn't go away, but you get stronger. Strong enough to carry it and still keep moving." Mei Lin looked at him. At his scarred face and weathered hands, and the way he held himself like a man who'd carried too much for too long but refused to put it down. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Helping me? Taking on all this trouble?" "No." "Why not?" "Because you're not trouble. You're a person who deserves a chance, and giving you that chance doesn't cost me anything that matters." "It cost you peace. It cost me nothing," he interrupted firmly. "Peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's knowing you did the right thing even when it was hard. And helping you? That's the most right thing I've done in years." They sat in comfortable silence as night settled over Red Willow. Above them, stars began appearing one by one, pinpricks of light in an infinite darkness. "Cole?" Mei Lin said eventually. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me when I was invisible, for treating me like I mattered before I believed I did. You always mattered. I just reminded you. Still, thank you." He nodded. "You're welcome." The weeks that followed brought a change to Red Willow that was subtle but undeniable. Mei Lin stopped being the Chinese girl Cole Turner kept around and became simply Mei Lin, the woman who could fix a fence straight and true, who showed up for work on time and did what she said she'd do, who'd stood up to bullies and hunters and refused to disappear. Not everyone warmed to her. Jake and Daniel kept their distance, but their resentment never fully faded. Morrison still charged her extra when he could get away with it. There were still looks, still whispers, still moments when she felt like an outsider looking in. But there were other moments, too. Moments like when Mrs. Patterson taught her to make bread, patient and thorough, treating her like a granddaughter instead of a tenant. Moments like when the blacksmith offered her steady work, not as a favor but because she'd proven herself capable. Moments like when children started waving to her on the street, calling her by name, asking to see the fence she'd built or the coop she'd fixed. Small moments, normal moments, the kind that made a life. 3 months after that first night in the stable, Maylin stood in front of a mirror in her boarding house room and barely recognized herself. Not because she'd changed so dramatically, but because she finally looked like someone she remembered being, clean, fed, solid, real. There was a knock at her door. "Come in." Cole entered, hat in hand. "Got something for you." He handed her an envelope. Inside was money, more than she'd ever held at once. "What is this?" "Your share from the jobs we've been doing. Been setting it aside. Figured you might want to start saving, maybe get a place of your own eventually, or maybe just have something put away for emergencies." Maylin stared at the money, at the proof that she'd earned something, built something, created value through her own hands and effort. "This is too much. It's exactly what you're owed. I kept track." He shifted his weight. "Look, I know you've been staying here because it's cheap and convenient, but you've got options now. You could rent a room somewhere else, could even think about buying a small place if you save enough. You don't have to stay just because—" "I'm not staying because I have to," Maylin interrupted. "I'm staying because I want to, because Red Willow it's home now, or as close to home as anywhere's been in a long time." Cole smiled. "Good, because the town would be worse off without you." "You really believe that?" "I know it. You've made people think, made them question their assumptions. That's valuable, even when it's uncomfortable. Maybe especially when it's uncomfortable." Maylin looked at the money in her hands, then at Cole. This man who'd seen her at her lowest and treated her with dignity anyway. Who'd never asked for anything in return. Who just kept showing up day after day, proving through action that kindness wasn't weakness and decency wasn't naive. "I want to ask you something," she said. "And I need you to be honest." "Always am. Do you think I'll ever stop feeling like I have to prove I deserve to be here? Like I have to work twice as hard, be twice as good just to justify my existence?" Cole considered the question seriously. "Probably not. Not completely. That's the price of being different in a place that values sameness. But here's the thing. You were already working twice as hard and being twice as good. That's not new. What's new is that now you're getting credit for it. Now people see the work, not just the worker." "Is that enough?" "Only you can answer that. But I'll tell you what I think. I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I think you're building something here that matters. And I think anyone who can't see that is blind in ways that have nothing to do with their eyes." Maylin folded the envelope carefully and set it on her dresser. "I saw my reflection today, really saw it, and for the first time in years I didn't see something broken. I saw someone who survived, someone who's building a life instead of just enduring one. That's because that's what you are. I couldn't have gotten here without you. Maybe, but you're the one who did the work. You're the one who chose to stay instead of run. You're the one who stood up when standing up meant getting hit. I just held the door open. You're the one who walked through." There was a commotion outside, voices raised in excitement. Cole and Maylin went to the window and looked out. A wagon had arrived, some traveling merchant selling goods. People were gathering, examining wares, chatting with neighbors. Normal life. Normal evening. And there, in the middle of it all, was Maylin's reflection in the window glass. Not hiding in the background. Not pressed against walls, just standing there, visible and solid and undeniably present. She thought about the girl who'd sat filthy and starving outside Morrison's store, convinced that being invisible was the same as being safe. She thought about all the versions of herself she'd shed like old skin, the terrified child, the desperate survivor, the girl who thought dirt was armor. What remained was harder, sharper, more real. Not perfect. Never perfect. She still woke with nightmares sometimes. Still flinched at raised voices. Still felt that flutter of panic when men looked at her too long or stood too close. But she was here, alive, building something. And that was enough. That was everything. Cole touched her shoulder briefly. "Come on, Mrs. Patterson's making stew. Says if we're late, she's giving our portions to the dog. She doesn't have a dog. That's how you know she's serious. They went downstairs together, sat at the long table in the boarding house dining room with the other residents. Mrs. Patterson served stew that was too thick and bread that was slightly burnt, and Mei Lin ate every bite because it tasted like belonging. After dinner, she walked through Red Willow's streets one more time, past the general store where Morrison was closing up for the night, past the saloon where Jake and Daniel would be drinking themselves stupid, past the church and the blacksmith and all the small businesses that made up this small town. She thought about her mother, who died believing the promises of America were lies. She thought about her father, whose body still lay somewhere beneath a mountain. She thought about Wei, who she might never see again, but who she hoped, desperately, constantly hoped, had found his own version of safety somewhere. And she thought about herself, about the girl who'd learned that survival wasn't the same as living, that being seen could hurt, but being invisible hurt worse, that belonging wasn't something you were given, but something you built, brick by brick, day by day, through the simple act of refusing to disappear. The stars were bright overhead, cold and distant and beautiful. Mei Lin stood in the middle of Red Willow's main street and let herself be seen. Let herself take up space. Let herself exist without apology or shame or fear. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because the world had welcomed her with open arms, not because every person in Red Willow had decided she deserved to be there, but because she had decided. She had claimed her space and defended it and refused to let anyone tell her she was less than human. That was the truth beneath all the dirt she'd finally washed away. Not beauty, not worthiness in someone else's eyes, just the stubborn, undeniable fact of her own existence. And that was enough. That was everything. She turned and walked back to the boarding house, where Cole was waiting on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing her one. "Thanks." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Red Willow settle into night. "You gonna be okay?" Cole asked eventually. Mei Lin thought about it, really thought about it. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." And she meant it. Not because everything was perfect, not because all her problems were solved, not because the world had suddenly become kind, but because she'd learned the most important lesson anyone could learn, that you didn't need the world's permission to matter, that belonging was something you built, not something you were given, that the strongest armor wasn't dirt or invisibility, or making yourself small. It was simply refusing to disappear. She'd been filthy when Cole found her, starving and desperate and convinced she was worthless. But beneath all that dirt had been something that no amount of suffering could destroy. The stubborn, resilient, unbreakable core of who she was. And now, clean and fed and finally visible, she could see it too. Not what had been washed away, but what had always been there, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for her to notice. Courage.